Hello, my name is Manny Gonzalez, and today I will be doing my literary terms quiz. And today I shall be starting with symbolism. Symbolism can basically be a person, place, or thing that has a meaning, but it can also have a completely separate meaning from what you'd usually associate it with. A great example I can think off the top of my head would be a red spider lily, which you can find in Japan. Essentially, us in America, we usually associate the color of red with rage, passion, love, stuff like that. But in Japan, the red spider lily has a completely different meaning. It's usually a signifier for death. And in Japan, in their media, they would use the red spider lily to signify a character is dying. A great example off the top of my head I can think of would be a character surrounded in a field of spider lilies, red spider lilies. Essentially, that would signify that the character was going to be dying in the TV show, and we shouldn't get attached. So go figure. The next literary term I want to talk about is theme. Theme is essentially the underlying idea of the story. It is the message within the story and should not be confused with the plot, which is just the events happening in the story. A great example of a theme would be love conquers all. Good will always overcome evil. You'll only ever become strong if you're willing to sacrifice yourself or have somebody you're willing to protect. Things like that could be the theme and leave an important message on to the viewer. The next term I want to talk about is point of view. It's basically who's telling the story, essentially, or what perspective is the story coming from. There are four types of point of views. There's first person, which you can usually tell it's first person because they use I, we in the story. I can actually name a book. Percy Jackson uses first person perspective. We follow Percy Jackson himself and his story with his friends Annabeth and Grover. The second is a third person point of view. You can usually tell you're reading third person when it uses he or she in the story. Like a great example would be she traveled to India. He went down to Walmart. You can usually tell you're reading third person from those use of words, like he or she. The next one is the omniscient narrator. From my knowledge, the omniscient narrator is the all-knowing narrator. He narrates a story. He knows what's happening. He can go to and from certain points in the story, essentially. And the omniscient narrator, well, I can't really think of any stories from off the top of my head, but a good example, I guess, would be like a flashback sequence, like a a series of unfortunate events. The narrator of that TV show basically travels from certain points in the story and tells the audience what is happening, or like recaps us on what's going on so far. He is able to give us all the key details we're all missing out on as the audience that the main characters do not know. That is the omniscient narrator. The last one, I believe, is either limited omniscient narrator or limited third person narrator. I'm pretty sure those two terms are interchangeable. Essentially, what it is the narrator, but he's only the omniscient narrator, but he's limited in what he's able to do. It's essentially he's able to focus on the emotions of the character, what they're feeling at that moment, what they're thinking. A good example would be like anytime a narrator, they zoom in on the main character's face and suddenly we're just like regurgitated a bunch of information like I don't know, she hasn't told him that she was 3 months pregnant, or he's contemplating leaving, or like stuff like that. Like the narrator would tell us what they're thinking at the moment and what emotions they are feeling. The next literary term I want to go over is denotation. Denotation is basically a word and its literal meaning, I guess you could say. Like what we think about when we hear the word, like what it actually means. A good example would be home, a place a person lives and comes home to after a hard day of work. The home, or a snake, a long, armless and armless reptile, essentially. Now for connotation. Connotation is basically like what feelings the person thinks of when they hear the word. Like for home, I think of a warm place that I belong, or somewhere I can come home to, or a dream I strive for. And snake, which could be like somebody who's slimy or evil, or has ulterior motives, something like that. Like there's a separate meaning to like when you say a word from denotation. So denotation, the literal meaning, and connotation, the I guess it's the feeling of the word. Connotation is the feeling of the word you get when you hear the word. All right, the next literary term is imagery. Imagery is basically text that can appeal to the five senses. There's the best way I could describe it. A good example would be, I don't know, the house smelt like freshly baked cookies. The leaves crunched under my foot when I stepped on them. The feeling of the wood and the bark was rough and had a lot of texture to it. Or the cracker was very dry and salty. Stuff like that that usually a writer would use in their stories to appeal to the five senses, which are sound, sight, taste, touch, hearing, stuff like that. And that is what imagery is. The next term is setting. Setting is basically when the story takes place and where it takes place. Good examples could be the boy left his house at 3 o'clock and got to Walmart at 3:15 to do some shopping real quick. Or it was mid-noon at the park and the autumn leaves were just falling. Essentially, like, it's basically what point is what point is the story taking place, like the time, where it is it. Like a good example would be Percy Jackson and his friends at the water park as they get attacked by robotic spiders and it's nighttime. Alright, the next literary term is irony. There are three types of irony to my knowledge, which are situational, verbal, and dramatic irony. Irony is basically, to the best of my knowledge, essentially like a situation that you did not expect to happen, or an unexpected situation that happened. And usually, most of the time, ironic situations are usually used as in like jokes. A great example I can think of for verbal irony: a student ends up failing a test, and he ends up saying, "Yo, guess what? I guess I'm the smartest student here." Despite him failing the test, he knows it's ironic because he failed, so that's why he said it. He said it in an ironic fashion. All right. The next one is situational irony. Essentially, like the situation the irony happens in. Instead of verbal irony, it's more like an event that's ironic. A good example I can think off the top of my head would be if a doctor who's supposed to come in for a lecture about health suddenly gets sick. That's ironic considering he was going to give a lecture about how to stay healthy, but he ended up getting sick himself. The next one is dramatic irony. And dramatic irony is basically for the sake of making the story more, well, dramatic. It's to heighten the tension. Essentially, I can think of horror movies. They usually use a lot of dramatic irony, like Halloween, the Halloween franchise, Friday the 13th. Like, the killer's hiding in the closet. You know they're in the closet, yet the main character still opens the closet despite it looking very suspicious. That is dramatic irony right there. It's ironic because the character got themselves in a much more dangerous situation. The next term we will be going over is a simile. It's basically a figure of speech, or comparing two unlike objects with words like or as. A good example was, she was as bright as a diamond. He ran as fast as the wind. She was as busy as a bee. The cake was as sweet as honey. The next one is metaphor, which unlike similes, metaphors basically don't use like or as. They're basically like, they're trying to make a comparison like a simile, but like they don't use like or as, essentially. That's pretty much the only difference I can, to my knowledge. A metaphor could be something like, the class was a zoo, the city was a stone jungle, or, off the top of my head, he was as smooth as silk. He was a smooth criminal, essentially. It's basically similar to a simile, but not at the same time. And that was all the literary terms. Thank you for your time, ma'am, and have a good day.